Hi, I'm Isabel Trautwein. I'm in the first violin section of the Cleveland Orchestra and have been there since 2002. I'm actually an alumnus of the New World Symphony. I was here from 94, 95 for a season. I chose to make a practice guide about the Schumann Scherzo from his second symphony. This excerpt is on so many lists. It's often in the prelims, and sometimes you play it again in later rounds. And I think you really want to master this excerpt. You want to be the one who sets yourself apart. Of course, you're going to play it in tune and with a crisp, clean stroke. But the way you set yourself apart is by bringing it together and creating larger musical gestures out of these tiny little notes. So I suggest a long-term approach to this excerpt. Take a month or so and divide your practicing into 3 phases. Start patiently with a lot of nice slow work on your left hand to get the intonation down. Then, when that's feeling really good, you move to your right hand and develop that stroke. It's a clean stroke close to the string that you'll want throughout this excerpt. And then finally, when you've done that work, you're ready to add your musical idea, your conviction, your realization, such as all of ours, that this is a very exciting, fun piece, the way it feels when you play it in a full orchestra. And you're going to bring that across, even when you're playing it all by yourself in an audition. Let's start with the left hand. First of all, when this piece is played at full tilt in a large concert hall that might be a little bit boomy, it's going to be heard as chords. Interestingly, almost half of the measures on the first page of this excerpt are framed by octaves in this way. Measure 1 starts with an E flat, and beat 2 again has an E flat. So together, you need to pay attention to this pure interval. I used a lot of piano for this. In fact, we'll have the opportunity here on this tape to hear the E-flat octave being played with a pedal, I suggest. And I suggest you go through this entire first page and hit those octaves on a piano and then tune the notes in between to that piano. There are 24 measures on page 1 that feature this frame. Measure 1, measure 3, measure 5, 7, 9, 10, it's on and on. So go through each of those patiently with the piano or without, any case you want, and make sure that octave is exactly as you want it to be. Now, there's something particularly challenging about some of these measures with these octave frames, and that's what I call a half shift. Let's look at measure 13. That one can be challenging. You have the first 2 notes in what I'll call second and a half position. You have low third position or 2.5 position, followed by 2 notes in regular third position, and now you have to extend back to this low third position or second and a half position. So in the span of 5 notes, your hand has to change position twice, albeit it's a small change, but this measure is often challenged. Slight shift and slight shift. The exact same thing happens in measures 17 and 18, and actually, again, in measures 39 and 40. There's a special spot that you want to devote your undivided attention to frequently. That's measures 27 and 28. These are again 1 octave arpeggios, but they change on the beat. Here's 27. Quick shift that I would do on my first finger to C sharp. And then spend a lot of time playing a clean, ringing D sharp. You want to practice those 12 notes a lot and analyze tension in your hand, anything that could prevent that from being really nimble and comfortable for you. And lastly, it goes quite high in measure 41, and measure 41 has the fastest shift that we're going to come across. It's this shift, if you do this fingering. I suggest that you practice measure 41 with the first two notes slightly quickened. Later, you won't hear this, but practice. So you create the illusion of a little bit of time before that shift. As you get faster and faster, that will really only be an illusion, but it'll help your mind keep a little bit of space, a little bit of time for that shift. Once you're comfortable with your intonation and you can play this excerpt approximately like this with just the most beautiful intonation, I would even record it this way. Then you're ready to move on to your next phase of practicing, which will be happening in your right hand. You want to develop a stroke that, as we said, is close to the string, firm, and is about like this. I suggest for a practice tempo, try to get yourself to 128 so that you can play 128 comfortably. If you add a little adrenaline in your audition, you'll be at 132, 133. That's probably about where you want to be. You really don't have to go faster than that for an audition. So get this stroke down by making your life a little easier, maybe doing multiples on each note. Start with fours. If you're having trouble finding this stroke to be comfortable or finding the place in the bow for it, use the Galamian method. That's to do this heavy, loud détaché starting at the tip and slowly, gradually moving down the bow until your bow stick starts taking over your stroke. Again, you don't want to feel like you're doing the off-the-string work. Your bow stick is going to do that for you. I would suggest building the stroke like this. And you'll find exactly that spot where the bow stick starts doing the work for you. Once you've done your fours, like we had said, you're ready to do threes. That's a little bit closer to reality since you'll be alternating down bows and up bows. So threes, starting on up bow. Once you have your fours and threes comfortable, you're ready to speed up your string crossings to full tempo. You want to make sure that your elbow is quick. Sometimes you have to go from a D string to an E string. And particularly challenging is the second ending where you're going from forte on the D string to piano on the E string. I suggest you do these string crossings now without your left hand being involved. Here's the tempo of 128. Maybe you want to start at 110, 120, build it up. That's, of course, up to you. And so on. Try to get that really coordinated. Now you're ready to work up to tempo using your left hand. Let's start at 120. I suggest you work up to tempo not by playing it through, of course, we wouldn't do that, but by working in chunks. 120, and I would suggest starting in chunks of 5. And that way you can see on each quarter note how relaxed and coordinated you've become. Then go up to chunks of 9. In this excerpt, it's very easy to become metronome dependent. A lot of people play, and I myself am guilty of this as well, play with the metronome running on quarter notes for a lot of their practice sessions, and then when the time comes and you're a little bit nervous, you end up rushing. So I suggest you start with your quarter notes, but if you have one of these smartphones or highly developed metronomes, don't set it on 128, set it on 32, and that way your 16th note will be 128. When you're stable with that, you can go down to 8th notes. And then down to quarter notes, and you'll definitely have developed your own sense of pulse if you can play the entire excerpt on basically one beat every other measure. You're ready to put this now together into larger gestures. I suggest you go back down to half tempo so that you can create a phrase and feel somewhat like you're playing a sonata movement or something. Use a stroke that was called by the wonderful Mary Lou Speaker Churchill the nitty-gritty. It mimics the full tempo stroke that you'll be using by being in the middle, very densely in the string, and using very little bow, something like this. Now I'm going to add the phrasing, okay? Rest. I suggest that these single 16th notes become the low point of your gestures or of your phrases. The accents are always vexing. They don't have to be that much, and in particular, I suggest using very little bow on them so that it doesn't cause your bow to end up on the string afterwards. Try to get to have really long gestures like that throughout the piece. When you get to measure 15, you have these little slurs. Those are really fun to do a little bit clipped. Something like that. Make sure you take a little time before the next pickup. Now, something I find really fun is to record the cello part of this piece. Once you get over your resentment that the cellists have such an easy part while we're working so hard, you can have a little duo partner in yourself. You'll record the cello part. It'll sound like this. And then you can play along to yourself. And that really adds that joy and bounce that we feel. And then you want to hear that in your head when you're performing it without. One last little trick that I've come up with for measure 41 is to exhale right on the downbeat. Actually, that works for several of the big accents. Kind of a sniffing out feeling. One helpful thing that I came up with for the larger landings, such as measure 11, measure 41, is to breathe out quickly on the arrival note. It sort of gives me a sense of relaxation in my body. Generally, as you're now reworking this excerpt and starting to do some run-throughs, pay attention to your breathing, to any tension that could be creeping into your shoulders. Make sure the inside of your hand is relaxed and your fingers are really moving from the knuckles. And if needed, go back to the beginning and start reworking your left hand, your right hand, and putting it together in larger gestures. I think you can never do that kind of work enough. So in closing, I'd like to say that focus your practicing to be very specific. Know what you're practicing for. Don't just generally run through it. Just like a figure skater doing a double, triple, backwards helix doesn't just try it over and over again. Sometimes we end up feeling a little panicked and practicing that way. Make sure you're focusing on one specific aspect of this excerpt, as there are really a lot of things to take care of. And then be creative. Try to find ways to have fun with this music. If you can be the one who's up there on stage transmitting that joy and excitement, then you'll really make a terrific impression. Have fun.